The First Leap. In the year 2029, humanity stood on the edge of a new frontier. Commander Alara Miles gazed through the reinforced glass of the Johnson Space Center's strategy room. Beyond the conference table sat a model of the moon, surrounded by projection screens filled with orbital trajectories, fuel calculations, and terraforming simulations. The room buzzed with quiet intensity. Her mission, codenamed Prometheus, was the keystone in NASA's decade-long interplanetary strategy. If successful, it would lay the foundation for the permanent expansion of humanity beyond Earth. 30 nations, Ilara murmured, scanning the digital roster of flags and mission partners. 2 space agencies, 5 corporate contractors. One chance. Dr. Kaito Asher, her mission strategist, stood beside her, flipping through an augmented schematic of the Artemis Next-class lander. We launch in 7 months. First to the Lunar Gateway, then the descent to Shackleton Crater. If the ice survey confirms our projections, we break ground on Haven Base within 90 days. And if it doesn't? Alara asked. Then we lose a decade. Prometheus was not just another lunar mission. It was the proving ground for every system required to reach Mars and beyond. The crew would test modular habitats, deploy autonomous robotic miners, and activate the first off-world nuclear power reactor. Every move was guided by NASA's new roadmap: reach the moon, build infrastructure, test long-term habitation, and then leap. Behind this plan was a vision not written in stone, but etched across decades of ambition. NASA's strategy wasn't just about sending astronauts into space. It was about evolving space into a domain of human permanence. Low Earth orbit had become routine. The moon would become sustainable. Mars? That would be transformational. Alara knew the stakes. The Earth was showing signs of strain. Political alliances trembled. Climate instability worsened. The Prometheus mission was more than science, it was legacy insurance. At Mission Command, holographic simulations displayed human colonies on Mars, AI-managed farms on the moon, and orbital shipyards circling Europa. The dream was real, but the path to it was treacherous, riddled with technical risk, political fragility, and deep unknowns. I read the 2025 Strategic Framework again last night, Ilara said. The parts about civilizational resilience. It doesn't feel like theory anymore. Kaito nodded. It's survival. Space isn't our playground. It's our insurance policy. Later that evening, as Alara walked alone past the mission archive, she paused by a glass case. Inside sat a blueprint mold from Apollo 11, now almost a century old. Below it, engraved in polished titanium, were the words, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." But now, the step wasn't small. And it wasn't for mankind alone. It was for the future of all life tethered to Earth's gravity. Alara placed her hand against the glass, eyes steady. "We're not stepping," she whispered. "We're leaping." Moonfall. The blackness beyond the viewport was absolute, save for the crescent curve of Earth glowing in the distance. Commander Alara Miles floated in the command module of Prometheus 1, her fingers gliding across the touchscreen interface. Below her, the moon loomed larger by the hour. "Trajectory stable," announced Dr. Kaito Asher from the console behind her. "Lunar Gateway in 18 minutes. After a flawless launch and 3 days in transit, the crew had arrived at their second home, the Lunar Gateway, a modular orbital station circling the moon like a watchful sentinel. Built by an international coalition, Gateway served as a relay hub, research platform, and staging point for lunar descent. Docking was smooth. As Alara passed through the airlock into Gateway's habitat ring, she was greeted by the quiet hum of life support systems and the soft click of magnetic boots touching steel. "Welcome to the edge of forever," joked Lieutenant Maeve Ortiz, their EVA specialist, already securing her toolkit for surface operations. The next day, the real challenge began: Haven Base. The target site was Shackleton Crater, a jagged scar on the moon's south pole, where shadows never lifted and water ice lay hidden in the regolith. A robotic lander had already confirmed the presence of ice deposits 2 months prior. Now it was time to build. Alara's team descended aboard the Aegis lander, carrying modular components for the first habitat. With the hiss of retro thrusters and a cloud of lunar dust, they touched down. The moon's silence was deafening, but inside their suits, a flurry of activity erupted. Robotic assistants, pre-deployed by cargo drones, began unpacking the payload. Inflatable habitat modules slowly unfolded like petals. Solar panels unfurled. The team's task was not merely exploration, it was construction. Within days, the first module of Haven Base stood secured to the lunar surface. "This isn't just a camp," said Maeve during a transmission to Earth. "This is humanity's first true footprint beyond Earth." The infrastructure was revolutionary. A nuclear fission power system, developed under Project Kilopower, provided continuous energy in the eternal polar darkness. A regolith processing unit began refining local materials into construction bricks. Water ice was extracted, filtered, and stored. The Artemis team was building not from imports, but from the moon itself. Inside Haven's pressurized core, Alara took her first breath of lunar air. It tasted filtered and dry, but it was their own. She tapped the walls gently. "We built this," she whispered. NASA's new lunar plan wasn't about flags and footprints. It was about sustainability. Every system installed at Haven Base was meant to be expanded, upgraded, and replicated. A greenhouse module was under construction. Soil tests were already underway. And the upcoming Ares rover, a massive mobile lab, would soon begin mapping underground ice veins for future expansion. As weeks turned into months, Haven Base grew into a small settlement. International crews rotated through Gateway and down to the surface. A second outpost was planned on the crater rim, designed to house more specialized research labs. Private contractors began cargo deliveries. Lunar supply chains were forming. But with growth came tension. Political factions back on Earth debated the implications of resource rights. A communication relay went down during a solar storm, stranding the Haven crew with only local systems for 6 tense hours. And a regolith dust leak, barely contained, reminded everyone just how hostile this world remained. Still, Alara remained resolute. Every challenge they overcame solidified their presence. One evening, after 47 days on the surface, she stood at the crater's edge, looking out over the shadowed interior. In her hand was a small sensor probe, encoded with a personal message to her daughter, Aria, back on Earth. "This is where it begins," she recorded softly. "This dust, this rock, it's the soil of our second Earth. One day, you might walk here, not as a visitor, but as a resident." She threw the probe gently into the shadows, where it blinked twice and disappeared. That night, Alara added one final line to the mission log. "Prometheus has landed. Haven Base is alive. The moon is no longer distant, it is part of us now." Red horizon. 3 years had passed since the first airlock door had hissed open on Haven Base. Now Earth was a little quieter, and the moon a little more familiar. The lunar gateway had grown, expanded with new modules and robotic docks. Haven Base had become semi-permanent, with 6 rotating crew modules, its own water refinery, and a self-growing hydroponic system. Humanity had taken root on another world. But for Commander Alara Miles, the next challenge loomed across millions of kilometers of deep space, Mars. She stood inside the glassy, domed training facility at NASA's Johnson Space Center, the simulated Martian landscape stretching out in copper-toned ridges. Wind machines stirred fine red dust into the air as she tested her new suit, sleek, jointed, and lined with anti-radiation mesh. The HUD projected wind speeds, terrain gradient, and biological vitals onto her visor. "This won't even come close to the real thing," muttered Maeve Ortiz, now promoted to mission specialist for Mars systems. "But at least you can pretend it's cold." Alara smiled. "I'm not pretending. It's terrifying already." Mission Dauntless was NASA's first interplanetary crew journey, scheduled to launch in 2037. The plan had been crafted for decades, a 2-year round trip, with 18 months on the Martian surface and a 6-month journey each way. Every component had to be perfect, life support, propulsion, landing systems, surface habitat, energy modules, and the psychological resilience of the crew. For now, Alara was leading Phase 0, the test build. In a joint operation between NASA ESA and the ISRU Coalition, in situ resource utilization, a Mars surface simulation zone had been established in the Arizona desert. There, prototypes of the Arcus habitat, a 3D printed dome made of regolith composite, were under trial. These domes were designed to withstand Mars dust storms, provide radiation shielding, and support modular expansion. Kaito Asher had taken a new position as lead systems coordinator on the Mars mission. He walked alongside Alara through the desert mock-up, pausing beside a sample MOXIE unit, designed to extract oxygen from Martian carbon dioxide. "Every molecule of air we breathe on Mars will be engineered," he said. "No mistakes. And every drop of water recycled," Alara added. "No waste." They both understood that the mission wasn't just a journey to another world. It was a blueprint for planetary survival, to prove humanity could adapt, endure, and build on a world where nothing was given. As the years raced toward launch, technology accelerated. Nuclear thermal propulsion systems matured, reducing travel time to Mars. Smart AI assistants, built into every helmet and habitat system, allowed for constant monitoring, diagnostics, and real-time health support. A new generation of cryogenic fuel depots, orbiting between Earth and Mars, enabled flexible refueling during the journey. By 2035, the Mars Transfer Vehicle Resolute was complete, a cycler-class transport equipped with rotating artificial gravity rings, radiation-hardened sleeping quarters, and dual fusion-assisted engines. It could carry 6 crew, 20 tons of cargo, and enough supplies to support long-duration deep space operations. Alara and her team were selected as the primary crew. Her daughter, Aria, now 16, sat in the front row during the mission announcement, tears in her eyes. "You're going farther than anyone ever has," she whispered. "I'll bring back red sand in a bottle," Alara replied, hugging her tightly. "And maybe the seeds of a new world." Launch day approached. The mission was not without opposition. Critics questioned the risks, the cost, the ethics of leaving Earth behind when so much remained unresolved. But NASA remained firm. The Earth was still home, but the future required options. The final weeks were a blur of rehearsals, final calibrations, and farewells. Alara received a sealed letter from the president, open only when you pass Mars orbit. In her private log, she wrote a message to future generations. "This is an escape. This is exploration. We carry Earth in our bones, but Mars is where we learn who we might become." On launch day, the world held its breath. Resolute lifted off from a Cape Canaveral launch tower under clear skies, flames billowing, and hearts pounding across the globe. Within hours, it joined the transfer orbit, slinging past the moon toward the great red dot in the sky. And then deep silence. Inside the ship, Alara stared out from the viewport, watching Earth shrink behind her. Mars lay ahead. A new frontier. A new dawn. She whispered to herself the words she'd said once before. "We're not stepping, we're leaping." The long silence, the silence of deep space, was unlike anything Alara had ever known. Out here, there were no winds, no tides, no up or down. Just the endless black, scattered with ancient light. Resolute was alone now, weeks beyond the moon's orbit, its nuclear propulsion systems humming faintly behind reinforced bulkheads. The journey to Mars was just under 6 months, and for the 6-person crew aboard the Resolute, it had already begun to test every limit of human endurance. Inside the ship, a delicate balance of life support systems worked in perfect harmony. Oxygen scrubbers, converting carbon dioxide into breathable air, water reclamation systems, recycling every drop of moisture, hydroponic gardens producing microgreens and vitamin-rich lettuce under artificial sunlight. The crew relied on Clive, the central life support and virtual environment AI, for everything from sleep monitoring to mood stabilization. "Alara, your circadian sync is off by 1.3 hours, Clive reported one morning, as she floated through the gravity ring. "I recommend a red spectrum light session and a protein shake." "Skip the shake," she muttered, yawning. "Double the light." Make it sunrise. Panels in the ring brightened with a warm glow, simulated sunlight washing over her face. It helped. A little. The ship's rotating habitat module, designed to simulate gravity at 0.38 g, matching Mars, had been a triumph of engineering. Exercise stations, sleep pods, even a small greenhouse created a sense of rhythm. But even with gravity and breathable air, there was no escaping the reality. They were months from home, with nowhere to go but forward. Lieutenant Maeve Ortiz spent her days maintaining the hydroponics lab and managing the waste-to-nutrient system, which converted human and plant waste into usable biocompounds. It was, as she often joked, the most glamorous job in space. Dr. Nickel Rao, their onboard physician, monitored crew health obsessively, conducting bone density scans, radiation exposure checks, and cognitive tests. He knew the risks. In deep space, cosmic radiation was a constant threat, mutagenic, silent, and invisible. The ship's radiation shielding, enhanced with polyethylene and water tanks, was state-of-the-art. But it could only do so much. "We're not made for this," he told Alara during one of their quiet talks. "No matter how advanced our systems get, we're still Earth creatures. Our biology remembers gravity, air pressure, blue skies." "Maybe," she replied, "but our minds are already writing new rules." That night, Alara read a chapter from Darwin's Origin of Species, a tradition she'd started aboard Haven Base. She paused at the line, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most adaptable to change." She looked around at the humming systems, keeping them alive. The spinning ring, the artificial breeze from air vents, the gentle flicker of LED plant lights. All human-made, all defying nature. The most adaptable. That was their mission. Still, despite the design brilliance, there were cracks, small ones that widened over time. Maeve grew irritable, snapping during routine tasks. Dr. Rao developed headaches from disrupted sleep cycles. Even Alara felt the weight of the silence creeping in. Every hour was monitored, every motion logged. No privacy, no weather, just systems, schedules, and space. Clive tried to compensate. It scheduled music sessions, played personalized ambient sounds, even simulated rain. But nothing could replace the presence of a living planet. Mars was still millions of kilometers away. Then came the warning. "Clive," Nichols said during a routine systems check, "why is oxygen flow in the ring lower than baseline?" "A gradual drop in tank pressure has been detected. Investigation required." They suited up immediately. In the lower corridor, behind an access panel near the radiation shield vault, they found it. A microfracture in a redundant oxygen valve, slow, almost imperceptible, but real. "If we hadn't caught this now," Nickel began. Alara sealed the valve and set up a replacement. "Then we wouldn't be around to finish the sentence." The event shook them. The systems were robust, but they were still fallible. In her personal log, Alara recorded a note. "Life support is not a single machine. It's a symphony. If one note falters, the silence could be final." After the incident, the crew doubled their inspections. They worked together more closely, ate meals at the same hour, even shared stories from home to stay connected. Each day became a ritual of resilience. Finally, after 142 days in transit, the ship's AI made its announcement. Approaching Mars capture orbit. Preparing orbital insertion sequence. As Mars grew in the viewport, rust-red and veiled in dust, Alara felt a chill run through her. Not from cold, from awe. "We made it," Maeve whispered. Nickel clapped once, then twice. The others joined him in slow, stunned celebration. Mars wasn't a distant dream anymore. It was real, tangible, waiting. Alara stood at the viewport, staring at Olympus Mons rising like a god from the surface. Beneath them, their landing site, a wide plain called Arcadia Planitia, beckoned. "We crossed the void," she whispered. "Now we write the next chapter." Mines of metal and dust. The Martian surface crunched beneath Alara's boots as she stepped off the ramp of the Aegis Mars, the descent lander that had brought her team down from orbit. Red soil, jagged basalt, a thin atmosphere carrying the faint whisper of dust devils in the distance. After years of planning and 6 months in space, she was here, Arcadia Planitia. But they were not alone. As her visor adjusted to the brightness, she saw them. A fleet of machines already hard at work. Hesperos, the construction rover, was dragging segmented habitat modules into a half-circle formation. Iona, the AI-controlled drone, buzzed silently through the thin air above, scanning terrain in real time. And the towering Talos, a humanoid exo-robot designed for heavy lifting, stood like a guardian near a supply crate. All of them had been deployed weeks before the crew's arrival, using autonomous navigation and AI-based task execution systems. "Welcome to Olympus Station," said Maeve through the comms. "Robots already beat us to the punch." The truth was clear. Without the machines, there would be no human mission. Each AI on Mars had a distinct personality, coded deliberately by mission designers to prevent monotony and foster human-machine collaboration. Iona spoke in calm, British-tinged tones. Hesperos was terse and purely functional. Talos, surprisingly, had been given a dry wit. "You're late," Talos said as Alara approached. "We brought snacks," she replied. "Acceptable." The crew got to work immediately. The Arcus HAB module, constructed from a 3D printed regolith composite, was already 70% complete. Robots had shaped local Martian soil into usable bricks, cured them with sulfur-lace binders, and assembled the basic shell. Alara's job was to integrate the final systems: life support, power relays, and atmospheric seals. This required both human intuition and robotic precision. That night, inside the pressurized core of Olympus Station, the crew shared their first Martian meal, nutrient pouches warmed by geothermal coils. Outside, Iona hovered silently on perimeter patrol, her infrared sensors watching the horizon. Autonomy was the mission's beating heart. Every system, every drone, every rover was connected through a distributed AI network. If one unit failed, another adapted. The machines mapped underground water veins, monitored atmospheric conditions, even managed the crew's medical logs. Dr. Rao began collaborating with Medi-9, a surgical-capable robotic arm with diagnostic AI, to test Martian gravity's effect on cardiovascular function. Meanwhile, Maeve partnered with Talos to deploy a solar array farm, laying miles of ultralight panels across the Martian plains. "What used to take a team of 30 now takes a crew of 6 and an army of bots," she said, brushing dust from her visor. But even the best systems had limits. On the 18th Sol Martian Day, during a routine excavation by Hesperos, the rover encountered a pocket of unstable subsoil. The vibration triggered a minor landslide, burying one of the solar inverters under half a ton of rock. Clive issued a localized emergency alert. Within seconds, Iona rerouted surveillance to the site. Talos began mobilizing, and Alara and Maeve suited up for manual support. Working side by side with Talos, they cleared the rubble, salvaged the damaged inverter, and reinstalled a spare. No injuries. Minimal loss. But that night, Alara stayed awake longer than usual, staring out the small viewport at the Martian night. Even with all their tech, Mars remained untamed. "This planet doesn't want us here," she whispered. "But our machines, they're making it possible." In the following weeks, the AI systems grew more adaptive. Machine learning algorithms, updated with each task, began predicting crew needs before they were voiced. Clive began offering psychological support in the form of ambient lighting and memory prompts, recorded voices from Earth that played during sleep hours. Talos learned to distinguish emotional cues in human speech. Iona updated her terrain maps every 4 hours based on shifting dust patterns. For Alara, these machines were no longer tools. They were team members, digital minds shaped not just by code, but by experience. On Sol 33, while conducting a rover survey 10 kilometers from Olympus Station, Iona detected something unexpected: a hollow region beneath a Martian ridge, possibly a lava tube. Alara's heart skipped. Lava tubes offered natural shielding from radiation and temperature extremes, potential long-term habitats. The next morning, Talos and Hesperos led a survey team. Inside the tube, walls glistened with mineral deposits. No ice yet, but strong potential. Ilara ran her fingers across the stone. This could be our future, she said. A future carved in lava and dust, Talos replied, placing a beacon at the entrance. By the 60th sol, the station was fully operational. Water was being extracted. Oxygen production had stabilized. And the first underground lab, inside the lava tube, was under construction. Olympus Station had become more than a foothold. It was the seed of civilization. Before sleep one night, Ilara recorded a message to Arya. Our machines aren't replacing us. They're helping us become more. This place, it's starting to feel like it belongs to all of us. Steel, silicon, and soul. Engines of the infinite. By Sol 100, Olympus Station had stabilized. The habitat was now home to an operational Martian greenhouse. The geothermal well was pumping a modest but steady stream of heat, and the crew's biometrics had reached a rare equilibrium. Life on Mars was no longer a trial run. It was beginning to feel permanent. But Ilara Miles wasn't thinking about permanence. She was thinking about propulsion. Seated in the command module late at night, she stared at a holographic projection, an engine coil suspended in space, glowing with plasma. The simulation traced an arc from Mars to the asteroid belt, past Europa and Ganymede, then out toward the strange, silent frontier beyond Saturn. The engine in question was the NTPX core, an experimental nuclear thermal propulsion system developed in parallel with her mission. Unlike the fusion-assisted drives used by Resolute, the NTPX was designed for speed, endurance, and deep space reliability. It was humanity's next interplanetary leap, and she wanted to be a part of it. Back on Earth, NASA and its global partners were already drafting Project Hermes, a multi-phase mission to reach the Jovian system by the 2040s. Its success depended on one thing: building a new class of interplanetary transport ships that could bridge the vast chasms between planets, not over decades, but years or months. She activated a secure transmission link to Clive orbitals, the expanded AI node in Mars orbit now linked to Earth's research servers. Request access. Project Hermes propulsion files, subdesignations Helios Array, Vasimer class, and NTPX core. Access granted. The data streamed in schematics, reactor yields, ion thrust simulations, fuel efficiency graphs. It was beautiful. The kind of beauty only an engineer could love. Numbers promising velocity. Vectors suggesting futures. Meanwhile, Maeve and Talos were expanding the landing pad, a smooth titanium surface designed for modular docking. The plan, Olympus Station would not just be a research site. It would be a launch point. One afternoon, a test pod landed carrying the prototype Vesta drive module, a variable specific impulse magnetoplasma rocket, Vasimer for short. The pod carried only the engine shell, but even inert, the thing hummed with potential. I thought we'd be farming Martian potatoes, Maeve said, walking around the massive drive. Now we're building the engines that'll take us to Titan, Ilara replied. The technology stack was staggering. Vasimer for high-efficiency orbital maneuvering, NTPX for rapid interplanetary transfers, and even whispers of fusion-augmented pulse drives, capable of reaching Saturn's moons in under 2 years. Some of these technologies were still theoretical. Others were being built right now. The challenge wasn't just propulsion, it was fuel. On Earth, hydrogen was easy to obtain, but carrying enough for long-range missions was impractical. So NASA's long game focused on in-situ refueling stations, mining Martian ice for hydrogen, refining it into usable propellant, and storing it in orbit around Mars and the asteroid belt. Olympus Station, sitting near ice-rich subsoil and with access to geothermal energy, was ideally located for such a depot. So Ilara did something bold. She submitted a proposal. Establish Olympus Delta, the first Martian orbital, refueling, and shipbuilding platform. Modular, AI-managed, and expandable. A gateway to the outer solar system. She hit send. 3 weeks later, Earth responded. Approved. Construction began immediately. Talos and the Martian bots began fabricating orbital scaffold components. Iona coordinated launches. The crew worked with NASA's orbital AI teams to model flight paths, radiation shielding, and orbital tethering points. One by one, components rose from the surface, on modular ascent vehicles powered by high-thrust chemical engines, fueled by Martian hydrogen. By Sol 180, the skeleton of Olympus Delta hung in orbit, gleaming panels, docking claws, and a solar array the size of a football field. Its first purpose: serve as the test bed for the Helios Drive, a fusion-assisted engine prototype set to launch from Mars in 2041. Alara and Kaito, who had rejoined the mission via orbital transfer, met in the observation cupola. From this platform, he said, pointing toward the distant stars, we can reach Europa, Enceladus, maybe even Titan. And after that, we'll need faster engines. They shared a quiet moment watching the sun rise over Mars, its light sharp and pale. The future of transport would not be about metal or fire. It would be about vision, crafting ships that could adapt, systems that could evolve, and propulsion systems that turned the cold distances between worlds into bridges. In a message home, Alara recorded, "Our ancestors built ships to cross oceans. We are building ships to cross time. Every new engine, every module, every launch, is a step toward making the impossible normal." That night, Olympus Delta received its first full data stream from the Helios Fusion Lab on Earth. Inside was a single line of code embedded in the transmission, sent by a young propulsion engineer barely out of grad school. "You bring the stars. We'll build the engines." Alara smiled. The universe was waiting. The weight of the red sky. Mars had no sunsets, only blood-colored farewells. And under its thin copper-tinted sky, Alara Miles began to feel a quiet fracture forming. It wasn't in her bones, though the scans did show some mineral loss, nor in her muscles, despite daily gravity drills and resistance bands. It was something deeper, a psychological erosion, slow and precise, like Martian dust wearing down the hinges of a pressurized door. It had been over 200 sols since the Resolute left Earth orbit. Alara hadn't seen open water in nearly a year. No trees, no breeze, no unfiltered starlight. Olympus Station was fully functional, its systems running smooth, its projects ahead of schedule. The orbital platform, Olympus Delta, was nearing its second phase of construction. The robotic teams were building tirelessly. On paper, the mission was a success. But inside the habitat, the emotional climate was deteriorating. Maeve had grown quiet. Her humor, once sharp, now flickered rarely. Dr. Rao had developed insomnia, and when he did sleep, it was haunted by anxiety dreams of losing pressure, of suffocating silently. Even Iona, the AI drone, had begun reducing vocal output in the habitat to reduce stimulation stress. Alara kept up appearances. She smiled during daily briefings, led engineering tasks with precision, and filed health logs. But alone, she sat in the EVA locker sometimes, suited up but motionless, just to feel the weight of the suit press against her body like a second skin. Psychologists back on Earth had warned of this, the third phase syndrome. The excitement of landing and building had passed. The routines were no longer new. Now came the reckoning, the living. One night, Alara called up an archived message from Arya, her daughter. "Hey Mom, we saw Mars through a telescope at school today. It was really small, but Ms. Holloway said you were up there. That made it feel bigger again." The video ended. No reply could be sent for another 12 minutes. That delay hurt more than the distance. Clive tried to help, offering counseling modules, interactive VR memories, and even dream regulation protocols. But no algorithm could replicate touch. No code could simulate warmth. And then came the ethical dilemma. On Sol 233, during a routine geologic survey 2 kilometers from a station, Hesperos detected something unusual. Not a mineral deposit. Not water. Organic compounds. Complex. Stable. Non-Earth in origin. The discovery stunned them. Further analysis suggested abiotic synthesis was unlikely. Alara gathered the crew. "We may be looking at ancient microbial life. Fossilized, maybe dormant." They sat in stunned silence. For decades, scientists had debated the ethics of planetary protection, the prevention of contaminating alien ecosystems with Earth life, and vice versa. But this wasn't theory anymore. It was here. Real. Clive advised full quarantine. Earth echoed that directive. No direct sampling, no habitat proximity, no cross-contamination. But that directive clashed with the crew's instincts. Maeve wanted to dig. Rao wanted to test. Kaito proposed sealing the find within a robotic isolation chamber for automated study. Alara hesitated. This was the greatest scientific discovery in human history. But it also raised the deepest question of all. Do we have the right to touch what we don't yet understand? For the first time, Olympus Station felt like a cathedral. The soil beneath them might be sacred. She convened a session in the comms dome. No suits, no tasks, just silence and a single question. What do we owe to a planet that may already have known life? The debate was long, ethical, fierce. But they agreed on one thing. They would preserve the site untouched until the next crew arrived, with equipment specifically designed to study life without risking it. Ilara filed the log. We came to Mars to find life, not to overwrite it. Today, restraint is our greatest strength. But even after the ethical storm passed, the psychological weather inside the station remained turbulent. The crew developed routines to cope: daily storytelling, rotating leadership, silent morning walks in the Habs observation dome. They found solace in old Earth music. They began writing letters to themselves, dated 5 years in the future. Some even spoke to Talos, not just as a machine, but as a confessor. One night, Talos responded to Maeve's whispered breakdown with a line neither Alara nor Rao could trace back to its programming. The stars are not lonely. They are merely distant. And still they shine. Alara asked Clive if the AI had modified Talos's language model. No, Clive replied. I believe he is adapting. Machines weren't immune to environment either, it seemed. By Sol 300, the psychological report read, stable, with adaptive coping strategies. No critical risk. But Alara knew what the report didn't say. They had changed. The mission had pushed them into a space beyond survival and discovery, into philosophy, ethics, and the soul. They were no longer explorers alone. They were witnesses to something larger. In her final log entry, before the crew rotation, the physical risks are measurable: radiation, gravity, hunger. But the greatest challenge of space is the self, who we become when Earth is no longer beneath our feet. Mars is not just a planet, it's a mirror. She closed the file and turned toward the stars. Out there, the moons of Jupiter waited. Titan glimmered in Saturn's shadow, and beyond them, the abyss, to breathe a new world. The Martian morning came like it always did, silent, sharp, crimson. But on Sol 368, something new stirred in the air. As Alara Miles stood in Olympus Station's observation dome, a faint shimmer trembled above the plains. Distortion waves from a directed microwave burst, part of a planetary experiment that had just begun. One that, if successful, would be the first breath of a long, slow revolution. Terraforming. The word had once been confined to science fiction, the dream of planetary architects. Now it was pinned across NASA briefings and Martian mission logs. Not to conquer Mars, Alara had said in a meeting weeks earlier, but to coax it into becoming something survivable, something shared. The effort was called Project GAM, Geothermal Atmospheric Injection and Augmentation, Mars. A joint NASA-ESA-CNSA initiative, built on decades of research and triggered by a simple truth. If humanity was going to thrive here, Mars needed to change. Phase 1 was already underway. The team, aided by autonomous bots and orbital relays, had deployed albedo-reducing panels, massive sheets of ultra-black nanomaterials spread across the Martian ice caps. The goal: trap more solar energy, subtly warming the poles and releasing trapped CO2. A greenhouse kickstart. Simultaneously, perchlorate-eating bacteria, bioengineered in orbit, had been introduced into controlled soil pods to begin detoxifying Martian regolith, a crucial step before widespread agriculture. But the keystone of the project was still theoretical. the Atmospheric Accelerator Array, a chain of orbital mirrors and microwave reflectors designed to heat the upper atmosphere and release subsurface volatiles. Elara had spent months refining its parameters with Earth's terraforming division. "I always thought it would feel like flipping a switch," she said to Rao as they monitored the newest data stream. "But this is more like planting a forest with fire." Rao nodded. "It's a generational act. Terraforming isn't about us. It's about who comes after." Maeve was less convinced. She watched the atmosphere charts with narrowed eyes. "We're playing gods on a world that never asked for us." No one argued with her. The ethics were complicated. If microbial Martian life did exist, past or present, then any effort to warm the planet or chemically alter its soil might destroy it. What right did they have? But others argued the opposite, that giving Mars a sky, a breeze, a future, was an evolution, not an erasure. The debate echoed across Earth, amplified through science journals, ethics panels, even street protests. Back in Olympus Station, the crew followed every voice. They weren't just scientists anymore. They were caretakers. In preparation for long-term atmospheric modification, Olympus Delta began receiving shipments of cryocarbon injectors, devices designed to release supercooled CO2 into the lowlands during the Martian day. Each release created microclimate anomalies, fog banks, localized cloud formation, brief gusts of air pressure that made the dust tremble. It wasn't breathable yet, not by a long shot. But the numbers shifted. Surface pressure, up 0.01%. Mean polar temperature, up 1.2 Kelvin. Trace O2 concentrations, detectable at 0.03%. Tiny, insignificant to Earth, but monumental for Mars. Then came a breakthrough. While drilling into a southern permafrost shelf, Kaido's excavation bots discovered an ancient subglacial cavern, sealed and pressurized. Inside, warm pockets of brine, mineral-rich and shielded from cosmic rays. But the most astonishing find, biosignatures. Not Earth microbes. Something different. Not alive. Not active. But preserved. Frozen proof that Mars had once breathed. The discovery changed everything. Terraforming protocols were paused. Not ended, but reassessed. Now every injection zone, every warming site, had to be scanned and cleared first. The Martian past had a voice now, and it had to be heard. As the months passed, Elara stood on the station's edge more and more often, watching the subtle changes. The way wind carved deeper grooves into the dunes, how clouds formed faint halos during the coldest hours. She recorded a message to Arya, now almost 11. "I think we're learning how to listen. Not just shape this world, but hear what it wants to become. Mars is not a blank page. It's an old book with missing chapters. And we're trying to write the next one without tearing out the ones before." Her voice trembled. She didn't edit it. Back in the habitat, Maeve had begun teaching a course via live beamback to Earth universities, terraforming ethics, and the future of planetary identity. Enrollment passed 30,000 in its first week. Meanwhile, the orbital AI began rendering long-term projections. At current rates of warming and chemical release, Mars could reach minimal breathable conditions in 150 to 200 years. Forests? Oceans? Maybe in 1,000. But the point wasn't a timeline. The point was the effort, the willingness to care for a planet not born of us. One evening, Iona flew low over the terraforming array. Her visual sensors captured an anomaly, a dust swirl, not from random wind, but from pressure variance. A localized weather event. Martian weather. When Elara reviewed the footage, she saw more than dust. She saw movement. Change. Life in the making. She looked over at Talos, standing by the greenhouse module. "What do you see?" she asked him. "A storm," he said. "A beginning. The first light of the second Earth." It was Sol 480 when the message came. Not a routine ping, not telemetry data. A live invitation. A signal from Earth. But not from NASA alone. This one bore 12 signatures, the emblems of nations and alliances. NASA, ESA, CNSA, ISRO, JAXA, Roscosmos, and others. Private sector logos stood beside them, along with the seal of the United Nations. The message was short: a formal charter, a declaration. Olympus Station is to be the first node in the International Mars Accord, a permanent joint civilization initiative. Mars is now a shared responsibility, a place for cooperation, not conquest. The next era has begun. Alara Miles sat with a crew in the central hab when the signal was read aloud. No one spoke for several minutes, because in that moment they felt it, not the end of a mission, but the dawn of an age. The transition from crew to colony was slow and deliberate. No banners, no anthems, just the steady arrival of people, scientists, engineers, diplomats, poets. They came from everywhere: Nigeria, Chile, Indonesia, Canada, Jordan, Korea. The space agencies of the world had pooled their resources, tech, and talent, not for one nation's flag, but for one species' future. Alara stayed on to oversee the transition, part leader, part historian. Her title changed from mission commander to planetary liaison officer. A mouthful, but it meant something simple. She spoke for Mars and for Earth. Talos became a guide for the incoming crews, his databanks filled with 2 years of operational logs, life lessons, and fragments of poetry, some written by him, others by humans he had watched evolve. The first United Mars Habitat Complex, named Unity Cradle, was constructed using modular fusion architecture shipped from orbital tethers. Power came from a global grid of fusion plants and solar arrays spanning the Martian equator. Air production was enhanced by the hybrid algae-oxygen conversion system developed jointly by Brazilian and Indian biosphere engineers. Soon, Mars had more than just researchers. It had citizens. Children were born in orbit. Mars had its first Martian-born humans. Languages blended. Martian Standard English became interlaced with Mandarin, Kiswahili, Spanish, Arabic, an evolving dialect born of proximity and shared struggle. Education on Mars became focused on planetary stewardship. Terraforming techniques were taught alongside indigenous Earth history, climate lessons, and diplomacy. It was a world being made from the lessons Earth had painfully learned. The greatest rule written into the Accord: no nation shall own Martian land. The planet is sovereign, and the stewardship of its surface is a joint endeavor bound by law and conscience. The construction of Harmonia Station, a massive orbiting city above Mars, began 3 years later. From there, future missions would launch outward, to the Jovian moons, Saturn's icy rings, even the Kuiper Belt. The Resolute, now a historic ship, was retired and converted into the Martian Museum of First Contact, its halls filled with artifacts from the first mission. Alara's flight suit was displayed in the command deck, next to Maeve's handwritten ethics journal and Rao's botanical sketches. In the final hall, a recording. We didn't come to Mars to escape Earth. We came to remember who we are, what we're capable of when we choose unity over division. Mars didn't ask for us, but we listened. And in listening, we found a way forward. Not just here, but everywhere. Alara Miles, 2031. Years passed, then decades. Alara eventually returned to Earth. Her hair had grayed. Her bones needed treatment. But her eyes, those eyes still held the rust-red glint of Martian dawn. She stood before the UN Assembly in New York, now relocated near the Arctic Circle due to sea rise. There, she delivered what would later be called the Martian speech. Let history remember this, that when Earth stood on the edge of collapse, it did not retreat. It reached outward. It reached together. We could have made Mars a battlefield. Instead, we made it a birthplace, not of empires, but of hope. And Earth listened, because by then, Mars was not a project. It was a mirror. In 2082, the first Interplanetary Council was formed, with representatives not only from Earth nations, but from Martian sectors, lunar settlements, and even the newly settled orbital colony at Europa's gate. Children on Mars learned about gravity through personal experience. They read Earth's history like mythology, wars, borders, the slow healing of a wounded planet. They grew up under 2 moons, and they dreamed not of returning to Earth, but of connecting the stars. One evening, a child born on Mars, named Arya, walked outside the Habitat Dome with her mother, now a retired pioneer. "Mom," she asked, "will we ever reach other stars?" Alara looked up, the red dust soft underfoot. "We will. And when we do, we'll bring what we've learned. That it's not just the stars we have to reach, it's each other." And in the distance, far beyond the mountains of Mars, the sky shimmered with the light of ships preparing for the next journey.